Before we jump into the episode today, I want to share something with you from my heart. First of all, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I really can't tell you how much your support means to me. We've been doing the podcast now for almost 4 years. I can't even believe it. And I'm so grateful for each and every single one of you that listens, shares an episode with your friends, sends me a DM or a text message letting me know how an episode resonated with you or any aha moments. Seriously, I couldn't be more grateful to be able to create this podcast. It has been such a blessing in my life, and I love hearing the ways it's been able to provide value in yours as well. One thing you might not know is how much work it takes to be consistent with a podcast. In fact, did you know that the majority of podcasts don't make it past episode number 10? And we are well beyond that. And it's just a lot thinking of the episodes, recording them, editing them, managing the guests, making sure that everything runs smoothly and gets uploaded consistently and regularly. And so that's why I have created an amazing opportunity for you to support the podcast monetarily. And in exchange for that, you will get exclusive premium subscriber content. So for as little as $3 a month, you can become a premium subscriber of the podcast. And every month I will upload new voice-guided workouts and breathwork meditation audio for you. So that way you can work out with me, coaching you in your ears. You can also take a moment to reduce your stress and relax and come down and ground down with one of my breathwork audios. So if that is on your heart to support the podcast for as little as $3 a month to become a premium podcast subscriber, I can't tell you how much that means to me and the growth of this podcast. I appreciate you. If you're interested, click the link in the description, become a premium podcast subscriber, new content every month, and while supplies last, I'll send you an exclusive podcast coffee mug so you can have your self-love and sweat coffee every morning. I appreciate you. Now let's get into the show. Welcome to Self-Love and Sweat, the podcast, the place where you'll get inspired to live your life unapologetically, embrace your perfect imperfections, break down barriers, and do what sets your soul on fire. I'm your host, Lunden Souza. Hey, have you grabbed your free Self-Love and Sweat monthly calendar yet? This calendar is so amazing. It comes right in your inbox every single month to help you have a little nugget of wisdom, a sweaty workout, a mindset activity, just a little something to help keep you focused and motivated and keep that momentum towards your goals. So every day when you get this calendar, you'll see a link that you can click that will lead to a podcast episode or a workout or something that will be very powerful and quick to read. And then you'll also see on the top left corner of every single day, there's a little checkbox in the calendar. And what that is that's for your one thing. You can choose one thing every month, or it can be the same, something that you want to implement, and make this something that you can easily implement, like daily meditation or getting a certain amount of steps or water, for example, and staying hydrated, and even taking your supplements. This can be something if you want to get more regular doing a particular habit and routine, you can choose what that checkbox means. So if you want your Self-Love and Sweat free monthly calendar delivered right to your inbox every month on the first of the month, go to lifelikeLondon.com/calendar, fill out the form really quickly, and you will have your calendar in your inbox within a few short minutes. That's lifelikeLondon, lifelikeLondon.com/calendar. Go get yours for free and enjoy this episode. Welcome to today's QMR Quick Mindset Reset. Today we're talking about observations versus evaluations. And this is very profound in communication because oftentimes we can actually be saying a ton of evaluations when really what would be better for connection and better for communication is to utilize observations. Now, this is something that I go deep in detail in my new course, Level Up Your Language, Level Up Your Life, how to go from talker to communicator. It's available 50% off right now for a limited time for the launch price. So I'm going to put that in the show notes. So if you feel like this episode resonates with you and you want to dive deeper into your words and the way that your words and what we say ends up what we are seeing in our reality, if you want to dive deeper into that, you can go ahead and take that course. But today we're going to talk about observations versus evaluations. Now, this is a part of what's called nonviolent communication. This is the work of Marshall B. Rosenberg. He passed away already, but he was a psychologist that worked with a lot of leaders, a lot of really challenging situations where people were having a hard time communicating. And he wrote a book called Nonviolent Communication, which I highly recommend everybody read. Seriously, it's so profound. And it changed my life. And so I share this in my course. I break it down in depth. There's more or less there's 4 parts to nonviolent communication, or 4 steps. And today we're talking about the first one, observation versus evaluation. Okay. So let me give an example of an evaluation. Oh my gosh, you always do that. And whenever you talk to me that way, you're so rude and so inconsiderate. The observation would be, hey, when you talk to me, you weren't making eye contact with me and your voice sounded a little bit, annoyed and frustrated. What's up? Right? Saying what happened, saying what is, versus putting our toppings all over it. Hashtag no toppings. When it comes to wanting to connect through communication, if we start making observations about somebody like, oh, when you just walked in, you were so rude and you never talked to me, it's like we're setting the other person up that we're attempting to communicate with. We're setting them up to get defensive, right? I wasn't being rude. That's not what I meant. That wasn't my intention. I don't always do that. And it can really hinder that connection. It can really prevent somebody from being able to connect with you through communication. Another thing that was embedded in what I just said was universal quantifiers, which is like always or never, right? When we do that, it creates defensiveness in the person that we're talking to, because instead of connecting with you and communicating with you, they're thinking like, okay, what's some evidence that I haven't always done that? Or what's a time that I did do that? So, when this person says never, I can be like, yes, I did. Remember this time, right? And it becomes too tit for tat. And we end up trying to convince the person rather than connect with them. So another example would be, he's always late to meetings and he doesn't care about his job. Right? Versus you might be like, hey, I noticed that you showed up late to the last 3 meetings. We got started a little bit late and then we didn't have enough time to cover everything that's necessary to move the project forward. What can we work on so that you can get to these meetings on time? How can I support you? Right? So thinking about the language that we use and all the toppings that we put on it. Because the truth is it's kind of like an iceberg. Okay. If you think about an iceberg, the tip of the iceberg is above the ocean, right? And you can see that, right? That's the words that come out of our mouth, the way that we show up in the world. But there's also the bottom of the iceberg, the stuff that you don't see. And so a lot of that is in that deep structure, in that below the surface part of the iceberg. There's a lot of stuff that we might not realize, like where we got our communication style from, where we got our word choice from, our tonality, right? You ever hear people say like, oh, I sound like my mom, or I sound like my dad, or I'm, communicating in those same ways. It's because that's really part of our programming. And if we don't acknowledge where our communication style might have come from, and also maybe some of the trauma, big T and little t, that created a response that now is these word choices, right? So when we're doing a lot of the that deep work and a lot of the stuff that I do with my clients one-on-one, we begin to see, oh, that's probably why I communicate that way. Oh, that must be a defense mechanism. That's why I'm putting a lot of these evaluations out there, and I'm kind of blinded to some of these observations. When we slow down before we approach someone in conversation. This can really help with making sure we choose observations over evaluations. Because think about it, whenever maybe you've been frustrated or upset, and then you want to write out that email or send the text message or just like have the conversation, right? And I'm sure you've heard of the tip before. And if you haven't, it's a really profound one, but where you just write the email, but don't send it. Sleep on it for 24 hours, 48 hours, come back and look at it and decide if that's what you want to say. I think we could use more buffer time before we jump into the conversation, into the communication opportunity. We could use more buffer time that could help us decide, okay, am I jumping into this conversation with a bunch of evaluations and a bunch of toppings? Or can I get clarity? Can I come down? Can I take a couple days, a couple hours, whatever we might need to then decide what we're going to say? So that way it can be an actual observation. We can actually say what happened instead of getting our emotions and all of our things wrapped up in it and then blurting out an evaluation of like, you're always rude, you don't care about it, you're never on time. That frustration, I feel like, has a place, right? Write it down. Write out a letter to the person that you never send to them. Write it out and rip it up and burn it, right? Just because we might feel a certain type of way doesn't mean that we have to express it in the exact way that we want to right away, right? It's nice to have a little bit of buffer time and to ask myself, okay, how would my best self show up to this conversation? Right now, I'm evaluating all over the place. How can I center myself? How can I get clear on what specifically happened so that I can make an observation instead of an evaluation? So then my conversation drives connection, and I'm not trying to convince the person that they did or did not do this, and they're not trying to convince me that they did or did not do something, right? And it becomes like tug of war. Okay, so in today's QMR, in this quick mindset reset, I want you to think about what are some evaluations I'm making about people? What are some evaluations I'm making about situations? How am I taking an observation and blowing it up and putting all my extra toppings on it, right? Think about how you can now approach conversation with observations instead of evaluations. This has been really helpful in conversation, in tough conversations, whether it's with people I work with or even my closest friends, or even, people that have been my partners, right? To make sure that we practice and we kind of rehearse. I do that a lot. Like I practice my observations instead of my evaluations, especially when I know I'm going into situations that can sometimes trigger me, whether I'm going around family or close friends or just certain situations where I'm like, you know what? I'm not proud of how I was communicating the last time. Or even if I am, I think I could do even better. And practice, rehearse, write it down. Like I said, write it out and wait on it a little bit. Or talk it out to yourself. When I'm preparing for conversations, I will talk to myself. I'll put my headphones in and go for a walk and talk out that conversation. I put the headphones in so that way when I'm walking around, people don't think I'm talking to myself, which I am, but it's just, I put the headphones in. So then it's just like, yeah, it's like I'm talking on the phone or just talking to somebody, but I like to get it out and practice because sometimes what happens is the way we want to communicate isn't our autopilot. And we're trying to change that autopilot and be like, okay, I usually communicate like this. I don't want to be that person anymore because the outcome is not getting me connection. I want to communicate like this, but I have to practice. It doesn't sound like me yet, or I need to practice a way that it does sound a little bit more like me and the person that I want to become. So don't be afraid to practice these observations so that you don't get them caught up with evaluations. Okay. That's your little home fun or homework for this episode, is to notice when you're making evaluations instead of observations, and start to practice saying what is, saying specifically what happened, So that way you can really drive connection in communication and conversation. And like I said, if you want to grab my new course, Level Up Your Language, Level Up Your Life, how to go from talker to communicator, I dive into all 4 points of nonviolent communication, including this one. Plus there's 9 modules, a quiz to figure out what your representational system is so you can understand yourself and others even better, and even have another one up in communicating with people who you know might, communicate different or see and feel and hear things differently than you. It's not about convincing, it's about connection. So go out, get out and make those observations instead of evaluations. And we'll see you at the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Self-Love and Sweat, the podcast. Hey, do me a favor. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, give us a review. This really helps a lot. And share this with a friend. I'm only one person, and with your help, we can really spread the message of self-love and sweat and change more lives all around the world. I'm Lunden Souza, reminding you that you deserve a life full of passion, presence, and purpose, fueled by self-love and sweat. This podcast is a Hit Spot Austria production.